World War II comes to an end. We start the transition from a wartime economy to a peacetime economy. Millions of soldiers are being discharged from the military. They're coming home. Guess what happens? Again, you have the backlash. Let's now start kicking the immigrant out. What are you doing here? We don't need you here. We don't want you. You're the one that's making things so difficult. Get out of the country. 1954, 1 million Mexicans are deported. Last year, under Obama, 400,000 immigrants were deported, and we did it with an awful lot of sophisticated people power and technology. You can imagine what deporting 1 million people in 1954 must have looked like, and in fact, we know that many U.S. citizens and residents got caught in those raids and were deported unconstitutionally. After World War II, we see the world divided between the Soviet sphere, the U.S. sphere, communism versus the democracies, or how we like to define ourselves as democracies. There begins to grow concern about the stability of Central and Caribbean nations, the poverty, and the concern that communism will take a foothold in these countries. And so we begin to do economic development in the hope of trying to give people work in these countries. We see the beginning, the introduction of twin plants, the birth of maquiladoras, in an effort to put people to work, only later realizing that it was a way of also exploiting the cheap labor that was available to us in these poor countries. The backlash continues in 1986 with the passage of the Immigration Reform and Control Act by Congress that for the first time made it illegal for us to employ an undocumented person. In 1994, NAFTA is passed by Congress, and we are promised that with NAFTA will come the development that Mexico needs. It will create more jobs. It will keep people in Mexico. As a result of that, immigration will go down. It will be wonderful. We will all have work. We'll all be prosperous. We'll all hold hands around the Rio Grande, and we'll all sing Kumbaya and be at peace, you know. In fact, we learned it didn't work that way. And today the statistics are saying to us that the economy in Mexico has declined. The wage disparity between people in Mexico and the United States is even greater today than it was pre-NAFTA. And interestingly, at the same time that NAFTA was being introduced, you saw the beginning of special border control operations beginning in El Paso with what was initially called the border blockade and later changed to Operation Hold the Line, specifically aimed at stopping the flow of people across the border. Shortly thereafter, we saw a similar operation on the Tijuana, California border known as Operation Gatekeeper, which then led to pushing people to cross in through the United States, through Arizona and the desert in Arizona, counting that the Arizona desert and heat would serve as a surrogate border patrol agent and stop people from crossing, because if they attempted to cross through the desert, they would cook, they would die in the desert. Last year, 2010, recorded a record number for bodies found in the desert in 1 year. In 1996, Congress passes the Illegal Immigration Reform and Responsibility Act, which brought into existence bars to legalization. You enter the country illegally, you stay in the country for 180 days plus one, you will now be barred from legalization for 3 years. You enter the country, you stay here illegally for 365 days plus one, you will be barred for 10 years from ever being able to legalize. You get caught, you enter the country, you get caught and deported, and you re-enter, you will be permanently barred from ever being able to legalize. I mention this because one of the things that you hear today is that why must people enter illegally? Why can't they do it the legal way? You don't do it the legal way is because it's almost impossible to do it the legal way. That 1996 law also said that people who do legalize are prohibited from getting any kind of public tax-supported assistance for 10 years. I've been at this for 33 years. I've seen thousands of people go through Annunciation House. I have yet to meet one person who is undocumented, who succeeded in applying for and receiving food stamps, welfare, or housing. I just haven't seen it. Perhaps someone somewhere in the country has. I just haven't seen it. What I'm saying to you is that it is next to impossible for people to receive social benefits if they are undocumented. It also increased the threshold for people that are sponsoring an immigrant to 125% of the poverty guideline. It means that I cannot be a sponsor of anybody attempting to legalize if my income is not at 125% above the poverty guideline for the number of people that are part of the family unit. In other words, making it economically much more difficult to be part of helping someone to immigrate into the United States. That law also limited the ability of immigration judges to do reviews of asylum. So people petitioning for asylum and were denied asylum, the review process is much more difficult. We're living with that right now. If you are from Mexico and you are directly affected by the violence that is happening in Mexico and you present yourself at the border and ask for asylum, within about 7 to 14 days, you are going to have what is called a credible fear interview. That interview is conducted by an asylum officer. If in the process of that interview, at the end of it, the asylum officer determines that you do not have a credible fear, you are then immediately removable, and you cannot appeal that. You are removed. So the 1996 law limited greatly the process of political asylum. This brings us to the myths that underlie a lot of the discussion that goes on in the immigration debate today. One of them is crime, that immigrants. I spoke today at Creighton Prep and I had an opportunity to have some lengthier question and answer periods with some of the students. Many of their questions were related to crime. The belief that immigrants are a source of criminality in the United States. Between 1994 and 2005, the undocumented population of the United States doubled. It went from 6 to 12 million undocumented people. There are reasons for that, which we don't have the time to go into, but it doubled. One of the research institutes then went to the FBI and asked the FBI to do an analysis of crime in the country during that 10-year period. You need to understand that you cannot be arrested and booked for a crime anywhere in the United States, be it the largest metropolitan city or the smallest little town, without that statistic making its way into the FBI computers. The analysis of the FBI computers told us that between 1994 and 2005, when undocumented people in the United States doubled, during that same period, violent crimes went down 34% in the United States. Homicides went down 37%. Robberies went down 40%. Assaults went down 32%. And property crime went down 26%. The undocumented population doubled, and across the country, crime went down. Obviously, I'm not implying that because immigrants came in, crime went down. What I am implying is that contrary to the belief that undocumented people, that immigrants entering the country means crime goes up, the FBI statistics are not substantiating that anywhere near as being true. Not satisfied with those statistics, the think tank went back and analyzed which states were the recipients of the largest influx of immigrants in that 10-year period, states like Texas, Florida, California, and they identified 19 states that are the recipients of the largest number of immigrants in that 10-year period, and they separated them from the other states. So you had two groups, 19 and 31. They asked the FBI, do your numbers again. The FBI comes back and says, in that 10-year period, both groups saw a reduction of crime, but the greatest reduction of crime took place in the 19 states that were the recipients of the largest number of immigrants. El Paso, Texas, a city with 800,000 people, right on the border with Mexico, with an estimated 100,000 undocumented people. A year ago, when the FBI released its national statistics, where they rate the largest 100 metropolitan areas in the United States, said that after Honolulu, Hawaii, El Paso was the second safest city in the United States. I've been teasing with people that when I was invited to come here to Omaha, Nebraska, that one of the things that kept me from wanting to come to Omaha, Nebraska, was that I was concerned for my safety. I was going to leave the second safest city in the United States and come into the crime-infested neighborhoods of Omaha, Nebraska, and I wouldn't come unless I could be absolutely assured that I was going to be safe while I was here in Omaha, Nebraska. Immigrants don't pay taxes. The state comptroller of the state of Texas, Carol Keaton, a gubernatorial candidate who ran against Rick Perry in the 2008 governorship race, a conservative Republican woman. Her son, Scott McClellan, was George Bush's press secretary. He resigned to help manage his mom's campaign for the governorship. She was the comptroller of the state of Texas. Her office, under Carol Keaton, did the first ever analysis of the impact of undocumented people in the state of Texas. Carol Keaton found out that there were 1.5 million undocumented people living in the state of Texas. She said that if somehow you could magically wave a wand and pull out all 1.5 million people, that Texas would take $1.7 billion hit annually to its GDP. The Cato Institute recently said that if left alone, the undocumented population of the United States will add $1.5 trillion to the United States gross domestic product in the next 10 years. If you don't know who the Cato Institute is, it's one of the conservative think tanks in Washington. It's one of the entities that is often quoted by conservatives in regards to statistics. So they consider those statistics credible. That same Cato Institute said that if you could deport the 11 million people that are undocumented in the United States, the Cato Institute said the United States would take a $2.6 trillion hit to its gross domestic product. Okay?